Hey everybody, Caesar here. This is Critical Art 64 with sort of a design what if about 2020's Mulan, a perhaps misguided live-action remake of 1998's Mulan. Now, out of all the 1990s Disney Renaissance films, I would say Mulan and probably Aladdin were my personal favorites. You know, I was about 8 years old at the time the movie came out. I grew up in a single-parent home, so my mom would drop me off at the town's recreation center, which was kind of like our version of the Y during the summers when she was working. And then the youth counselors would take out the kids. The youth counselors would take the kids out to the movies if they had signed permission slips and brought movie money with them, which I didn't do because I was not interested in seeing a Disney musical. At the time, my favorite movies were like a toss-up between Enter the Dragon, Tombstone, Austin Powers, maybe Desperado. I was a really weird kid. I thought Mulan was for girls, but all my friends at the rec center were going and they seemed real excited about it. So I went without any money and I snuck into the theater with them and was blown away. You know, the movie was like if the character of My Fair Lady f***ed up at being like a refined woman and then instead went to war. I think Mulan is the only Disney princess to actually straight up murder people. I think that's pretty sweet. So, I was excited when they announced this movie because we'll either get a beat-by-beat remake with all the fun characters or maybe a large budget kung fu movie with great action and maybe more accurate Chinese history. But what we got was neither of those. Apparently the Chinese in 1998 didn't really like the movie because Mulan is like a cultural icon to them and this was nothing at all like their depiction. But Disney wanted that sweet Chinese yuan. And they attempted to make Mulan more appealing to the Chinese. If they wanted to go that way, they should have just gave the project to a Hong Kong studio and then just produced it. Instead, they kept the white American writing staff, but removed all the fun Disney stuff. So no Mushu, no Cri-kee, no funny grandma, no ancestors, no sexy Captain Li Shang, no Du Bois, no musical numbers.
Hey, that's pretty good.
So what they got instead was both sides, East and West, saying this is not Mulan. Brilliant. Their best bet was sticking close to the cartoon, since that's what everyone is expecting, and that's kind of more their wheelhouse. But here I did a quick Photoshop of the Mulan actress Liu Yifei in the cartoon costume, just to kind of see what that might have looked like. Which segues nicely into the next issue, which was the political climate. By now we've all heard the controversies regarding Liu Yifei supporting the Chinese Communist Party, and how they filmed in Xinjiang, which just happens to be the place where the Chinese Muslim Uyghurs live. And they're being sent to concentration camps or whatever by the agency that assisted them with securing the locations for filming, which of course sparked boycotts and led to the Hong Kong activist community to, including the Japanese and the Koreans, to dub the politician and political activist Agnes Chow the real Mulan. And it's for this reason I'm using the likeness of Agnes Chow instead of Liu Yifei in the painting, and in solidarity with the Hong Kong protesters. So first you start out with a rough sketch. First I really wanted to focus on the funny animal sidekicks. No Disney movie is complete without them. Little Mermaid had Flounder and Sebastian. Pocahontas had her raccoon and the hummingbird, and Snow White had seven horrible dwarves. So here I got Cri-kee, Khan, and Mushu. There's already a lot of really good art and cosplay showing Mulan, realistically. For instance, there's a really good site, and he does a lot of other Disney characters, but I would suggest going to jerkavince.com, and it's JIRKAVINCE rkavinse.com. You know, he has a lot of realistic Disney characters. Pretty awesome stuff. You know, I also took some inspiration from another awesome painter, Katsu Nakajima, who does photorealism. Definitely check his work out. You know, it's real ironic that, you know, Disney goes out of its way to kowtow to China and its communist government when Walt Disney was really, really anti-communist. It's kind of ironic. You know, he actually testified in front of the Un-American Activities Commission. So it's kind of funny that his company works with China. You know, and as far as trying to be more Chinese, you know, in the original movie, what they messed up with is they fight the Huns. I don't think that was the initial enemy. I think they fought the Mongols. You know, Mulan takes place about 600 AD in China, northern China. I think that one thing that really struck the Chinese as un-Chinese was just kind of how, I mean, especially Mushu, they had a lot of complaints with him, but just they thought Mulan kind of acted kind of like a Westerner. Because one thing that's really big in China, especially around this era, was Confucianism. And, you know, one of the main tenets of Confucianism is filial piety. So in other words, you know, listening to your parents. So it would have been kind of unthinkable for her to disobey her parents as such. Kind of self-aggrandizing, they kind of saw her as that. In the original ballad, she actually just leaves with their family's blessing. Like they allowed her to leave. You know, she also spent 12 years in the military before they found out that she was not a man in the actual story. So that's interesting. You know, in the new movie, they kind of have her being powerful from the beginning. Like she has, they say chi, but I think they totally misunderstand chi. Because if you actually look at the Chinese character for chi, which is like this energy that people have, it actually is based on the character for rice, like the steam that comes from rice. So it's sort of just energy that is renewable, that you can get from breathing and eating. And in the new movie, they say only men can wield that. I don't think any Chinese discipline has ever made that assertion. So that obviously might strike people strangely in China. You know what's another funny thing is in the OG, in the cartoon Mulan, they wanted an able-bodied man from every house, and you know, before Mulan could even join with the army, she would have to pass the physical tests. Now, I don't think her father was in any condition to pass those tests, which leads me to believe that he would have been rejected. So Mulan wouldn't have had to go into the military at all. So I think that's kind of a plot hole there. Another interesting thing about Mulan, you know, she may just be a legend. I think her real family name was like Zhu or Wei, something along those lines. But the guy who wrote the ballad changed her name to Hua, which is a type of flower, or I think it just means flower. So Hua Mulan kind of translates to the word magnolia. You definitely use, you know, when doing backgrounds or anything, you got to take into account foreground, background, and middle ground, and the separation between the two. Another thing is, you know, as you recede back, you kind of want to soften the edges and decrease the contrast, darken the lights, lighten the darks, maybe shift a little bit to the cool side of the colors, so that creates that depth. So that way, when you can squint, it it almost looks like a photo. The funny thing is that, Disney made a big effort to try to, appease and appeal to the Chinese, because China, if I'm not mistaken, only really allows, I think 50 to 70 movies per year that the Chinese government approves that they can go to wide release in theaters in China. And so in order to get those positions, movies will either try to appeal to the Chinese or remove anything that's problematic to the Chinese from the movie itself. But it's funny, in such they made such a big effort to try to appease the Chinese government. The movie was filmed in the area where there's a lot of Chinese Muslims in northern China with the Uyghurs. It kind of puts a big spotlight on the concentration or re-education camps that the Chinese set up. And since it brings a light to that, China actually banned any news coverage about the movie Mulan. So, Disney really blundered here. They're probably going to lose a lot of money. Nobody's happy with this. And, what a lot of Westerners, including us here in America, don't really know about is just the, and that's due to a big failure in our media, our piss poor media in the United States. We really don't know the scale of these protests in Hong Kong, or why they were protesting. That they, back in 1997, Britain gave Hong Kong back to China, and they decided to run basically what they called one country, two systems, and they let Hong Kong operate under British-style common law, which is real good system, and capitalist policies and free trade, and they get to own their property and all of this. But they've slowly been eroding away at that, and they passed a security law that makes it to where if you commit a crime in Hong Kong, by the Chinese government's definition, they can now extradite you from Hong Kong to mainland China, throw you in a concentration camp. Maybe if you criticize the president, you call him Winnie the Pooh, which is, funnily enough, a Disney character as well, which is now banned in China. They could throw you in a concentration camp. They arrested Agnes Chow. I think she pled guilty on some charges. She's been arrested several times. It's a real shame. But, if I could bring a little bit of at least awareness in the West about this. So this just about sums up the painting, just putting some finishing touches on some leaves on the ground, a little bit detail work, and then that'll about do it. So here's the final work here. I'll play you guys out on a beat I made. If you want to see anything specifically broken down or video about something, please leave that in the comments. You could reach me at my email, illmaestroproductions@gmail.com. Or you could even do the YouTube channel name. I just realized that too. You can do criticalart64@gmail.com as well if you have any inquiries, you want any commissions. Definitely subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you could spread the word. I'm a new fledgling channel. I'm trying to get out there. So I'll play you guys out on a beat I made, and we'll call it a day.